Recognize. Umbral Walker. D01. Recognize. The Caleb G. D02.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Whelmed, Episode 1.
I'm a little overwhelmed.
You're overwhelmed. Freeze was underwhelmed. Why isn't anyone ever just whelmed?
I am Caleb. Don't call me a sidekick. And I'm here to introduce someone who is not here for a play date, Mr. Rich Howard.
I'm not here for a play date.
Alrighty, so we are very happy and proud to welcome you to episode 1 here of Whelmed. Normally, each episode will be devoted to one episode of Young Justice. However, today we are going to be doing a little twofer for you guys, and we will be discussing both episode 1 and episode 2 of Young Justice because they actually were considered a pilot. They aired together. So Episode 1 is titled Independence Day. Episode 2 is titled Independence Day Part 2. And they both originally aired November 26, 2010. Quite some time ago.
Yes, that's true. They did have another title for the second episode. I believe it was Firework.
That's correct. Yep. And it's still labeled as Fireworks if you watch it on Netflix.
Yeah, so there's still people refer to it as episode 1 and 2 of Independence Day, but
it's just two different ways to think about it. Independence Day 1 and 2 or Independence Day and Fireworks. Either way, these two episodes form the pilot for Young Justice. They give us the foundation for the rest of the show.
So let's get into our first segment.
Well, we already kind of started that because I broke that a little bit early. So
You did, that's right.
That's all right. We're just too excited. We're too excited to stick to our outline. Our first segment here on Whelmed is called Hello, Megan.
Are you going to post in her saying it over your voice?
I don't know. We're going to find out.
I think you should.
You're giving my technological editing capability a lot of credit here, Rich.
No,
we're going to see what happens.
Okay, fine. Yep. So just in case we want to cut straight to it. So the first two episodes that we're going to cover are the two episodes that were back to back that aired together as the series pilot, Independence Day and Fireworks. The air date was
November 26, 2010.
2010. And this episode brings together the core 3/4 members. Really, it starts with the first 3 members of the core team. And they started with the group that at least most of the fans are familiar with. So Kid Flash, Robin, and Aqualad, although this is a very new and I must say much improved version of Aqualad that I grew up with. And then during the episode, they actually run into Superboy as well, and we'll get into those details. And they form what will be called the team from now on. Yeah.
I always thought it was kind of weird that they never got a team name.
Did you think it was weird? Because I think it's awesome. And the reason I think it's awesome is because having the Justice League is it's almost like they decided to do a name for the Justice League. The Justice League PR people did a name because they're the front people. They're the big group that needs to be represented in a particular way. The team is covert. The team has no name. To be called Young Justice, who would care? Who would know? Because they're not publicly advertising themselves. So to call themselves Teen Titans or to call themselves something means that they'd have a public identity. And the fact that they only call themselves the team through 2 seasons makes me really happy because it means they weren't. To me, it seems like the writers were looking at what the quote-unquote reality would be, trying to affect some verisimilitude for what would really be happening with the show.
Wow, that is a great point, Rich. I never considered it like that. That makes a lot more sense. But I will still always laugh whenever Batman uses the term Leaguers, because I just don't think that's something Batman would say. I think that's just beneath him. It's too silly.
Is it? Nice.
I need to call the Leaguers.
We're calling it the Leaguers.
Come on. It's Batman. Batman doesn't do that.
I don't know. All right, well, quick nod to Bruce Greenwood for doing a fantastic Batman voice, trying to come on the heels of Kevin Conroy for decades.
That's true. That's something we will talk about a lot in the course of all of these episodes of the podcast. The voice talent is just beautiful and outstanding for the entire run of Young Justice.
Also, we plan on doing some bonus episodes in between the weeks that the episodes of Whelmed will air. Those bonus episodes will focus on a lot of things, and some of it will be specific characters from the show. So we'll dive into Bruce Greenwood, Bruce Greenwood's Batman. We'll dive into deeper into the history of some of the individual characters that we may gloss over during these main episodes. And that's it, man.
Yeah, that is in very brief what these 2 episodes were about on air. So. Okay, and with that, let's move on to our second segment, Mission Briefing. All right, so Rich, tell us about Mission Briefing and what people will see or hear in these segments.
In Mission Briefing, we're going to talk about we're going to do a detailed breakdown of the episode. We're not necessarily going to put in some of the spoilers and foreshadowing things in this segment. We're going to be saving that for later. You'll be able to listen to, if you haven't seen Young Justice yet, you can hear a little bit about the episode, hear a little bit about the characters, about how they reflect back onto their original DC characters' versions, and how they were tweaked and changed for the show. Things like that won't necessarily be spoilers. All right, so Mission Briefing. So, Caleb, tell me a little bit about what this episode was about.
Looking at these 2 episodes as a whole, this is the creation of the team. We said that already. This is where the team comes together. They have their first adventure, so to speak. There's a very interesting transition very quickly of each of these sidekicks working independently and then starting to come together as a team. Of course, that teamwork and cohesion is not immediately formed. We see that over the course of the next few episodes, but it's really fun to see just within these 2 20-minute chunks of television that they move from working on their own to cooperatively taking down the big bad at the end of fireworks. So it's real fun to see how they come together like that. I think the long and short of this is that Kid Flash, Robin, and Aqualad, Calder, come together. They investigate Cadmus, and that's where they find Superboy.
Right. So there's what happens at the beginning of the episode is the main, or these 3, I keep saying 4 because Superboy's in there. These 3 sidekicks actually are coming together to theoretically be indoctrinated into those first steps of becoming Justice Leaguers. They've known each other for in some cases years. Robin in this case has been doing his thing since he was 9. I think he's 14 at this point in the show. So he's been doing it for 5 years. And he and Kid Flash have known each other for a while and become friends. And they know Aqualad as well. But they haven't worked together as a team in any way, only with their proteges. And in this particular episode, they're taking those first steps. Oh, I know why I keep saying 4. Because it's Speedy.
Because Speedy. Yeah, I was just going to bring that up.
So Speedy is Green Arrow's sidekick. And he is an archer. For those of you who've watched the live-action Arrow TV show, you've seen Roy, their version of Roy Harper. And kind of the cornerstone of Roy's personality is Roy's angry and bitter. And he's been that kind of way for many, many years. And he's had a little bit of a rougher childhood than, say, Wally as Kid Flash, or even Dick Grayson as Robin, even though Dick's parents died. So in this particular case, they come to the Justice League headquarters, or what they think is the headquarters, which is the Hall of Justice. Turns out the Hall of Justice is really just a kind of a PR front for the Justice League. And when 3 of them, Kid Flash, Robin, and Aqualad, are ready to accept their first step to the Justice League, Roy actually knows that they have the Justice League has a space station in orbit, which is the actual headquarters. So Roy gets really, really pissed. He gets pissed that he's not actually taking that real first step that's memorable. He wants to stop being a sidekick. And his reaction, I'll have to admit, when I first watched it, I was like, oof, boy, that's definitely Roy. He is hot-headed and over the top, but it's almost a little over the top. And even when my wife was watching with me, she was like, wow, was that quite proportional to what was happening? I'm not quite sure. And then you realize later on down the line, because the storytelling is so tight, once you get later in the season, you realize exactly why he was that reactive to the situation. It was not a random choice. It was made specific to the storyline itself. So Speedy leaves and takes off. The Justice League are called off on some earth-shattering mission oh god, who was it? Mordu? Somebody was using the Amulet of Aten to blot out the sun.
It was not Mordu, but Zatara put the call in.
Yeah.
And I'm just so excited that Zatara is in this episode.
Yeah.
One of my all-time favorite characters. I love the magic side of the DC universe.
Right, yeah.
And just throwing in Zatara, this dude in a top hat and tails, keeping up with Superman and Batman, love it.
This was the other thing that just made this show go to another level, which was the show wasn't just focused on the team, right? It just wasn't focused on the sidekicks. This show is about the entirety, the intergalactic entirety of the DC universe. They touch on everything in these first 2 seasons, and including a really interesting and rich, fairly deep view at even the Leaguers itself. You know, with a few exceptions. You see the Hawks, right? You see Hawkman and Hawkgirl, or Hawkwoman, whichever one, because they only refer to her as the Hawks, I think, in the show. They, I'll have to go back and check on that. I think the Invasion episode, actually, they mentioned.
They get very little screen time.
They do, and they have no voice actors for them.
Which is unfortunate. I have always liked those characters a lot.
Yeah, and that's okay, because what they're doing is doing a rich background. They're throwing characters in, but they're not just saying like, oh, we've got a character, so we need to put a voice in, which means we need to make up some random dialogue that makes no sense. These characters are making a tableau, this background that makes the entirety of what the team is doing feel more real. It feels deeper and larger, and in many ways subtler. So the team comes together during this episode while the League is taking care of this blotting out the sun mission. The team finds out that a place called Cadmus, this research facility, is on fire. The League was going to go, take care of that because Batman had some weird suspicions about Cadmus at some point, but of course blotting out the sun takes precedence over a local fire. So Kid Flash, Aqualad, and Robin head to Cadmus to help put out the fire and help where necessary. This scene right here, while they're there, opened up to me during watching this show that this Robin was exactly who I wanted him to be. Because it is Robin standing in a hallway and looking around and saying something is not right. And what's not right is he sees an elevator. It's a 2-story building, and he sees what he knows from his studies to be a high-speed industrial elevator. No one else would notice that, but he did, and so he knew something wasn't right. So he does a scan and hacks the elevator and realizes that it goes down what we eventually find out to be 52 floors. So that's the Robin that I want. The Robin that's charismatic. The Robin that's a leader at heart, though he's not yet have the maturity and age. He knows what he's doing. I love it.
This Robin is really fun to watch. He's got that, I'm a kid, I'm excited to be a superhero crime fighter, but he has the skill to back it up. And
he has a little bit of edge, too.
Mm-hmm,
like, he's
definitely.
Not just silly. It's like he has the dark part of him, but he's processed some of that, and he keeps it where he needs to keep it, and then tries to be a participant in life.
And I think that also goes to show that there is going to be a long road for Dick in his maturity and evolution as a character.
Yeah.
And if we started out with him as the super angry Robin, like exists in other versions or other characters that have the same title, we might not have been able to go as far, or we would have had to go down a very different path to get that character to where we want to see him later on. But the fact that this version of Dick Grayson is excited, he's already kind of mastered that edge, that darkness, and he's just willing to jump into the adventure.
Yeah.
Speaks volumes to what we're going to see later on, especially as we transition to season 2 down the road.
Right. And this episode, it begins to lay the groundwork for the conflicting personality types that turn this group of superheroes into a team over time. One of them, of course, Kid Flash's brashness, which seems pretty obvious, right? But Robin is the one that kind of got me a little bit. They really dug deep on Robin and his character and personality. In the comics, Robin has always been the leader of the Titans. It's always been the case. I expected Robin just out of inertia to become the leader of this team. And you first start to see glimpses here of where Robin will disappear and expect other people to have followed him. In one case, Kid Flash complains, way to be a team player, Rob. And Robin's like, you guys weren't right behind me? Like, what's your problem? Who's trained you? Like, come on. Like, you need to know what I'm doing 10 steps before I do, the same way that Batman does, which is not the case and not good for a leader.
Well, that also speaks to the dynamic between some of the Justice League heroes and their sidekicks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just from the few moments we've talked about here, we already see the fact that Batman has trained Robin to be just like him. Yep. They have a very close relationship. They have a close dynamic. Mm-hmm. Batman knows what Robin is doing. Robin knows what Batman is doing at all times when they're in the field. But you look at Flash and Kid Flash, they're running in circles. They're having fun. They're throwing quips. They're having a good time.
Yeah, very different dynamic.
And that right there establishes the world of this Justice League, this entire universe, so quickly and without taking time of an exposition dump or a bunch of background flashbacks. The writers of this show created these little moments. It may have been intentional. It may have just been a product of the script for these episodes, but they lay the foundation, I think, in a much stronger way than just saying, hey, here's what's been going on before the show started.
Right.
Because we as viewers get to watch it and realize it and create those connections in our minds.
And they really make it clear that there's a pretty common argument these days, particularly in the film industry, when we're talking superheroes, is an origin story necessary? And in some cases, I think that it is, if it's a character that's not very well known and whatnot. But the animated series typically jump right into it. They don't have their first episodes be origins. This is not origins. These characters, particularly these 4 characters, have been in the field for years. And we get to find out more about them after we get to like them as people. Then we get to peel back the layers of what happened to Robin that made him. Why did Batman take a 9-year-old and put him on the streets with him? Why is Kid Flash Kid Flash? And why is he different? And why does he have insecurities? And why is his sense of humor the way that it is? Or Calder and how he became who he was and be such a different character than the original Garth Aqualad. All that stuff gets developed, but they don't, like you say, info dump you right at the beginning. They drop you into the action. They do a little in media res and put you right into the action of these characters, and you are pulled right along with them in such a good way. So continuing on with the episode, they get there, they go down the elevator shaft. They find out that Cadmus, which may be hinted at by the name, is a cloning facility that are making biological weapons. They run into some crazy things called
Genomorphs.
Yeah, Genomorphs, baby. Including little tiny guys called Genomes, which were a really cute name, that had telepathic abilities, or G-Trolls, which are these enormous elephant-sized, super strong beasts as well. But what the most important part about what they find, really, is the fact that there is something called Project KR on level 52, where the rest of them want to escape and get to the surface and contact the Justice League. Robin actually takes them in the elevator down because he has been trained to solve the mystery. So they get down to level 52, and they discover that Project KR is Superboy. It is a cloned individual, force grown in 16 weeks to replace Superman should he die, or to destroy Superman should he turn from the light. And I make that quote specifically because we find out eventually that, though at first you think like, oh, turn from the light, it's just a poetic phrase of him going bad. No, that's actually the name of the villain group that we see through the rest of the season and who is financing Cadmus. So again, it's one of those things you wouldn't know when you first watch it, but like you'll find out by listening to this show, there are so many things you start to realize and pick up on when you rewatch the series over and over again. They free Superboy, but it's not that easy. Superboy's been telepathically mind-controlled and programmed, and at first, in the classic comic sense, fights the two potential allies, fight each other. And then they, realize there was a mistake and they become allies. But in this case, they did a really good job of paying homage to that particular comic trope and making it make sense. Superboy was mind controlled by Desmond, Professor Desmond, who is the guy who runs the show at Cadmus, to destroy them because they couldn't get them out of the room. That they'd locked themselves in the room with Superboy. So he controlled Superboy and told them to knock them unconscious or take them, which he did successfully. I would like to point out that this is the first time, too, I noticed that Aqualad was pretty highlighted in this fight. Robin gets taken down pretty hardcore because it's Superboy. Kid Flash gets taken down first because he's brash and dives into the fight. But Aqualad goes toe-to-toe with Superboy, and that's made this Aquaman fan very, very happy because it was showing the strength, the durability, the speed, the things that people overlook when they think about, Aquaman and Aqualad as characters. Eventually they all go down, though, and get captured.
And that is pretty much where Independence Day ends. However, the story picks up immediately following with fireworks. And with this episode starting out, we see that Professor Desmond has spoken to the light. So we get the big bad guys working as a team, organizing everything. We see them right off the rip. So the show tells us from the very beginning there is a secret group of people working behind the scenes on something.
Right. Long-term plan.
Yep. They play the long game. And I think Fireworks does a really good job at telling us that the light is in it for the long haul. Mm-hmm. They have plans upon plans upon plans. They are not just villain of the week material. And I love that. I love seeing it from the very beginning. And I love the storytellers telling us these guys are going to be around for a while.
Right, exactly.
And in true comic book evil villain theme, we do not know who the light is. We simply see weird computer versions of them all shiny and lit up, just like the name implies. So the light tells Professor Desmond to clone Aqualad and I almost said Speedy. I made the same mistake they did in the first episode.
Right, I'm going to talk about that in a little bit.
So the light tells Professor Desmond to clone Aqualad, who I always just want to call Calder. I never want to say Aqualad for some reason.
I know. I get it.
Mostly just because I love this version of Aqualad so much. You and I share that. So we're going to clone Aqualad and Kid Flash and Robin. And while this is happening, Superboy then gets a very interesting conversation telepathically, and he is given a choice.
So I actually just rewatched it right before this episode, and I'll actually correct you there. It's not telepathically because Miss Martian's not in the episode. So here's another thing that takes things to a whole new level. So they're going to, when he asks what to do with the sidekicks, they say clone them and have the genomes telepathically pull their memories out to put them in the new bodies so they can have clones that work for them. Now, this is a huge foreshadowing moment in the show because the idea of doing this becomes an issue farther down the line on a few different levels. But what happened is Superboy's leaving. He's walking down the hallway, and Aqualad, because he is brilliant, just starts talking quietly because he knows that Superboy will be able to hear him when no one else can. And Superboy tells him, "You can do what you want. You are free."
Well, Calder says that.
Did I say Aqualad?
No, you said Superboy.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Calder said. Aqualad says that. Aqualad says, "Superboy, we're here to help you, right? You can be free. You can do whatever you want, but think about this. What would Superman do?" And now this is a situation for Superboy that comes up through the whole show. This kid was programmed to either become Superman, the pinnacle of superheroes in the DC universe, or to kill him should he go rogue. This kid's identity, self-identity issues are horrifying. And it manifests itself in a lot of anger issues, particularly in the first, at least half of the first season. And at first it can look like, oh, they're just doing like a stereotypical teen angst character in him. But it is not on many, many levels. And if you watch what happens in the background and what he does and what he says and how he says it and his facial expressions, you'll see that he's wrestling with this. And then by season 2 becomes an absolutely amazing, fully grown and realized hero in his own, which is amazing. But in this case, that drop of what would Superman do made him want to be free, made him make a choice between, do I want to be the Superman who kills Superman, or do I want to be the Superman who would replace Superman should he happen to die? And he makes the choice to be a hero. And this takes that choice and puts it in the character's hands. And you'll see this a lot in the show. They do not force things on characters. They will put them in terrible situations and allow them to make choices that push character growth for each character, so that by the end of the first season, this group has become not just a team, but a family. And I love it. So he comes back and rescues them. Although Robin technically rescues himself, but he's pissed because it took him so long, and he's worried Batman would give him a bad time because he took so long.
Again, another great deal of the Robin-Batman relationship and the training that they have that has been done already. So Superboy comes back. He makes the choice to be free, frees the three of them, and then they start basically fighting their way out of Cadmus.
Right.
And we have this very long, very exciting, extended chase scene, fight scene. Everyone gets a little time to shine as they're escaping. We see some of those rage issues with Superboy as he's fighting some of the G-Trolls, but eventually they do get out.
Yeah. And during this scene, too, I'll point out that Superboy is getting telepathic messages from someone, but he doesn't know who it is. And he has to decide to trust this message, like go left, go right. And we don't know exactly who this is either, and we're a little confused. But when they get to the end, and they're almost on their way out, they actually get trapped. And all of the G-Gnomes actually, I don't know, there's at least 12 or 15 of them all telepathically basically shut them down, put them all to sleep, except Superboy.
And what's very interesting here, this is where we see, and we're breaching spoiler territory here, we see that Dubelex is actually been the one telling Superboy what to do. Mm-hmm. And he is the one that gives Superboy the chance to choose. And one of the things I like about this, he says he wants Superboy to make the choice to be the hope for all genomes. Or right. Xenomorphs, I'm sorry.
Right, Xenomorphs. Double X, we should say, because I don't think we mentioned it earlier. Double X is this character that he seems to be a unique Xenomorph. He's got little horns. He seems to have telekinetic and telepathic powers. And we see him through the episode. The first time we see him, actually, is he's in the elevator as it's closing and going down, which draws Robin's attention to the elevator, which makes him think this is a problem. Then later on, you see them having to make a choice between two hallways to get to Project KR, and they don't know which hallway to take. Double X shows up and throws a bunch of explosive barrels, because, it's a superhero show, every barrel's explosive, at them. But you then later realize he was throwing them to get them away from the tunnel they shouldn't go down and force them down the tunnel they should go down to get to Superboy. Mm-hmm. All of these layers on rewatching, you see some of the subtleties of this. He even tries to convince Guardian. Guardian is another... Here's another one, sorry. Another little aside. Guardian is a little-known Metropolis superhero. Sort of... He's had some kind of mixed history, but I think of him sort of-ish like a Captain America. He's typically presented with a shield. He was, invented, I want to say, in the 60s, kind of as an answer to a Captain America-like character, but fairly minor known. They made a nod to him in the actual Man of Steel movie as well. But Guardian is apparently the head of security for Cadmus, but he always walks around with a genome on his shoulder, and you realize pretty quickly that he's not doing this of his own accord. He may have been hired to do it, but now this genome, who's supposed to be there to help him with instant telepathic communication with everybody else, is actually controlling his mind. You see at one point, Double X actually tries to convince Dr. Desmond, Dr. Professor, I think they refer to him as Doctor in this show, to let Guardian leave his genome behind, and so the genome doesn't get hurt if there's a battle. He's trying to convince him to let the genome go away so that Guardian can actually talk to the kids with his own clarity. That gets kiboshed, and so he goes down with the genome because Guardian knows these kids, and he could talk to them and figure something out. Guardians, I'm a big fan. For some reason, I am a big fan of the B-list underdog heroes, man. Guardian is not a powerful character. He is just a trained human who's trying to do good in the world, and that's all he's doing. And I love the fact that he's not only in here, but he kind of plays a background but kind of pivotal role in a few interesting moments in both Season 1 and Season 2. And again, it provides this depth to the DC universe that they're trying to share in the show.
Yeah, the showrunners, the writers, the creators of Young Justice really went to the benches. They pulled a ton of faces and names that we don't see in the movies and on the comic book covers, but they used these people to flesh out and fill this world with more people.
They are clearly fans. All of these little things that we're going to be pointing out here tell us when we're watching the show that whoever is doing this is doing this as a labor of love, because they love the characters, they love the universe, and they get it. They get the emotional through line of what the Teen Titans were supposed to be and what the best and the most interesting parts of the Justice League and DC universe is supposed to be.
Absolutely. And that just makes the show much more fun and enjoyable to watch. So going back to the recap here of the plot, Double X basically lets Superboy choose what's going to happen. I know from there we actually get towards the big fight, but is there a moment in between there, Mr. Just Watch the Show?
Mr. Have seen this episode 52 times.
52, exactly. No more, no less.
No more, no less. I can't watch it ever again. Unfortunately, I'm glad we started the show. So in this particular case, Superboy chooses freedom. And so the genomes release all of the young heroes from this telepathic stupor, and as well as Guardian, who now begins to realize what he's been doing and what's been happening. And so he tells them, you guys go, I'll deal with Desmond, right? Because he's just a professor, right? Well, Desmond has already gone to one of his labs that you see him doing an experiment in earlier, and he brings something out called Project Blockbuster. Those of you who know the DC universe probably already know Dr. Desmond. Dr. Desmond is a Jekyll and Hyde-like character from the DC universe, so we kind of saw this coming. He's so terrified of the quote-unquote Cadmus Board of Directors, i.e. the Light, that he is going to take this experimental serum and give himself the power to be able to stop the kids from, escaping and ruining his plans. Again, it sounds a bit cliche, or at least pulls back on some comic-y tropes. But what ends up happening is that particular formula he's using is key to so much in all of the rest of the series. And you'll see this again and again. He drinks the serum. He becomes Blockbuster, who's this big Hulk-like monstrosity. In fact, Kid Flash actually refers to him as an incredible bulk, as a nod to the Marvel Universe, which I found a little funny. And then they have a big fight scene, because that's what happens, right?
And this is that really cool moment where Robin figures out a way to tactically win the fight, even though Superboy is just raging out, trying to punch Blockbuster Desmond to death or into unconsciousness.
Right. But they're losing. They're losing bad.
Oh, yeah. They're getting trashed until Robin figures out, oh, wait a minute, I get it. And again, this is another cool moment, because he doesn't just say, hey, go do this, hey, go do that, to give us, the viewer, the reasoning. We see Robin say, oh, I get it. Hey, come here. And he calls Kid Flash over. And then we just see the end of the conversation. Do you get it? Oh, yeah, okay. Boom. And they're off. Right.
And I'm going to talk about this a little bit in our Canary debrief as well. This showing, not telling, that they use over and over again in the show is brilliant. And it's to me, it's storytelling 101 that gets so lost by so many storytellers. And it's so nice to see to keep the action moving forward. If you run games, if you happen to be a gamer and you run games, you know one of the most important things to do at the table is keep the action moving forward. Don't roll a bunch of dice and have a bunch of non-player characters and supporting cast characters talking to each other and fighting each other while your players are sitting around a table. It's exactly the same thing. Get things moving. Focus on where the action is and then move the story forward. So they end up dropping a building on Blockbuster. They dropped the building on Blockbuster. One of the other subtle little things, to me, is as the building is coming down, it looks like they've lost control, right? They're going to get crushed. So Aqualad grabs Kid Flash, I believe, and dives over top of him, and Superboy grabs Robin. And these are the little moments that take characters who have just met, they've very literally just met, and see them bonding into a team. You see little choices. You see Superboy deciding to protect this person he's never seen. And in fact, even earlier when Robin says, oh, you free Kid, you free Aqualad, I'll free Kid Mouth. Earlier in the episode, Superboy looks at him and says, don't you give me orders either, right? You can see there's already some animosity. He doesn't automatically become their best friend. You see it slowly happening over a very short period of time, but so well paced during the episode that by the end of this, he is willing to throw his body over the body of this other person who tried to save and free him. It's just exactly the way it needs to happen. So when they do free themselves from the rubble and the rest of the Justice League shows up because craziness has happened and they're pissed, the Justice League is pissed about what's happened, you see them bonding together as a team. And this is where other bits and pieces of the style of these storytellers comes across, because Superboy has a suit on. It's a solar suit that's an echo back to some things that happened in the comics that supposedly allows him to absorb yellow sun radiation 24/7. But it also has the red S shield on the front of it, and it's been torn in the fight, so it's actually hanging over the S. So when the Justice League shows up, they can't see the S at first. They don't know who this kid is, but he sees and meets Superman for the first time. And Superman is standing there, and Superboy walks up and lifts up the flap from his shirt so that he can see the S shield, and everybody can see that they look very similar. And then Batman says, is that what I think it is? But before that happens, you see this passing of facial expressions between Superboy and Superman. Superboy lifting the thing up so he can see the shield and kind of smiling. Superman surprised. Superboy not sure how to read that. Superman looking upset and angry. Superboy looking upset and angry. This goes back and forth. You can tell what's going through these animated characters' heads without being over-the-top dialogue, cheesy dialogue being put over this, trying to tell us what their emotional state is. You get to feel it and experience it while it's happening. And it sets the dynamic between Superman and Superboy through the rest of the first season. I know you want to say stuff because I know that you're a Superboy fan.
Well, see, here's the thing. I'm not a Superman fan. Mm-hmm. As much as some people are. I like him in certain versions and certain stories. Mm-hmm. I liked certain versions of Superboy, but not all of them. But this version of Superboy is my absolute favorite.
I'm just nodding, watching the glee on Caleb's face right now, guys.
I think it's, oh man, I love him so much. I mean, I always love the fact that in the comics, Superboy is the one to punch reality, to change everything. That's just a horrible joke. I love making that joke because it kind of just, it's hilarious. And it's one of the things that's goofy about the character. But this version of Superboy is so real. And he has such a cool story arc. Mm-hmm. You talked about this at length already, Rich. The pressure that is put on him. He's 16 weeks old. He's relatively fully grown. And he is pinned between kill your idol or become your idol. And then his idol flies down in front of him. And the visual exchange between the two of them is so perfect and so beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely.
That it's just with looks. It's just with emotion and non-verbal storytelling.
Absolutely, which you don't see and you actually see it early in the first episode as well. There's the moment where There's the moment where Roy, Speedy, says this isn't really their main headquarters. They have a satellite up in space they didn't trust us enough to tell us about. And you see the Justice Leaguers in the background, their eyes shift. Now, this doesn't sound like a big deal, like you would see this in a live-action show, but when you do this in an animated show, you are doing it on purpose. You are doing this thing to show non-verbal storytelling in a way that most animated series just blow over. Do you have to do it? No. But they chose to do it because they wanted a bigger thing. They wanted a bigger platform to tell this story, and they wanted to fill that platform as much as they can. And another thing about Superboy that we get some hints at here is a couple of things. Robin, at one point in time, when Kid Flash is mouthing off to Superboy, Robin says, let's not piss off the guy who can, fry us with a look. Well, we find out later that Superboy doesn't have heat vision. Also, he tries to fly up the elevator shaft with Aqualad at some point in time, and it looks like it's working, but then he stops and starts to fall, and we realize that he didn't fly. He actually just jumped. He's not just confused, he's heartbroken when he says, Superman can fly. Why can't I fly? You see him so angry through most of the show. When you see him hurt, heartbroken in some of these, I'm starting to tear up, in some of these scenes later in the season, and particularly at the beginning of season 2, oh my God, you just feel so hard for him because he has so much feeling and he doesn't know how to filter it. And that feeling is either anger and anxiety and angst, but it's also deep, deep feeling and love for the friends that he has. It's just amazing. He's already feeling inferior to Superman on so many levels, and then Superman literally turns around and leaves. And here's the other thing about Superman in this, which I'll try not to get on a big tangent about Superman, but I get so pissed when people tell me that no good Superman story can be told because he's too powerful. Let me make this point. People do not love Spider-Man because arachnophilia is a thing. They just don't. It's not because he has spider powers that they love Peter Parker. It's because the stories are about Peter Parker. It doesn't matter. Superman stops the sun from being blotted out in this series, and you see a level of character on him that you don't get to see in so many other places because the story that involves him in this series is not about his superpowers. It is about who he is in spite of his superpowers. His reaction to Superboy's existence is not the stereotypical reaction people would think from the big blue Boy Scout. He is terrified. He is upset. And I get this. And some people give him some smack because, wait, why is he being such a bad dad? He was just told he was just told that he was violated and force cloned a son that he had nothing to do with when he has been choosing to not be in relationships with normal humans his whole life outside of the friendship and the family that he has. No romantic relationship at this point. We don't really see Lois Lane in this series. And so I can see him saying, I didn't get to make this choice for myself. Someone forced this choice on me. And I have other things to do, and there are humans. There are people here who have a better understanding of what being a parent means than I do in this situation. I don't know what to do. And it really hits home in episode 5, and I will go off on episode 5 when we get there because that is one of my favorite all-time episodes of the series because of this interaction. So a deep character that you just get introduced to, not moments before, you now have all of this sympathy for. It's amazing.
And with all of that happening in just mere moments of screen time, it makes it even more impressive. As Superman flies away, then we transition to this moment where the 4 sidekicks stand up to Batman and Aquaman and Flash, because Batman is basically saying, you guys screwed up. You broke the rules. Let's get out of here.
Yeah, you're not doing it again.
And Calder has this amazing speech of, no, we created something tonight. We worked together.
Yep.
We took initiative. We're going to keep doing this. We proved that we were successful and that we are capable of using your training.
Yes. And this is, again, another one of those moments I mentioned earlier where they put the choice in the character's hands. You don't see Batman walking up and say, okay, well, you kind of did okay. I guess we'll do a team. He says, no, you guys aren't doing this again. Aqualad says, we will. And through this whole double episode, you see him being so, not deferent, but definitely respectful of his king and his friend, Aquaman, and all the other Leaguers. He's the one who wants to call the League when they need to call the League. He's the one that keeps saying that we need to have a plan when Kid Flash runs off and Robin ninjas out of there somewhere to do his own thing. He's been so respectful. So in this moment at the end, when Aquaman tells him to stand down, and Aqualad says, "My respect, but no, I'm not doing it." That's when everybody perks up, right? When Kid Flash is mouthing off, or Robin is trying to say something, or Superboy is saying, get on board or get out of the way, I can see Batman saying no. But when Aqualad stands up, you've given a basis for this character none of us have ever met, whether you've read the comics or not. We do not know who Calderon is at this point. You see him, and we all have so much respect for him, you know that all the Leaguers do as well. And when he has something to say, they're going to listen. And the next scene they transition into is Batman making the agreement. We're going to do this thing.
And that's where he established it's going to be covert.
Yep.
He will be assigning them missions.
Yes.
He sets them up in Mount Justice in Happy Harbor, which is established as the original Justice League headquarters, but it has been decommissioned for a while.
Yeah.
This is where we get Red Tornado being on site to be the team's babysitter.
Right.
This is where we get Black Canary, another one of my personal favorites, on site to be the team's trainer.
Yep.
And this is also where we get the introduction of Miss Martian.
Yes, that's true.
The Martian Manhunter's niece.
Yes. And so here's a couple things I want to mention about all of that. First of all, the actual first Justice League headquarters was a cave. Back in the day when the Justice League first came together. So again, these people who are writing the show, right? So Greg Weisman and Brandon Vietti, the showrunners here know their material and are folding it in really subtle and good ways. They're making echoes to things that super geeks know, but you don't have to know to watch the show. The other thing I wanted to say was that the Miss Martian character, I kind of hated her, I have to say. I have to admit on the air. I had some flashbacks. I'm a big fan of strong female characters in comics, and I think we saw a lot of, when I was growing up, a lot of very strong personalities and characters in female superheroes long before we would see them. Like, comics get mocked for having, over-sexualized, women and blah, blah, blah. But man, I loved Batgirl growing up. I loved Power Girl. I loved Supergirl. I loved these strong female characters. And one of them that I loved the most outside of Batgirl, because I was a big Teen Titans fan, was a character named Starfire. And some of you probably know Starfire's character from the more kid-focused Teen Titans show. But as an adult, she was like Wonder Woman turned to 11. She was all the warrior, woman that Wonder Woman always was. But she also had these solar powers and energy beams and could fight without them with weapons and armor, and she was just great and a tactician and smart. And in the kid-focused show, they turned her into kind of a ditzy preteen character that bugged the heck out of me. It's like they deflated all of it and turned her into this stereotype that bothered me. I will admit that I only watched the first couple of seasons of that Teen Titans show as much as I could. I was not a big fan. I have friends of mine who are huge DC Comics fans who love it, and that's fantastic. And I hear later on she kind of grows into the character a little bit more. But my concern here, the reason I bring it up, is because the first time I saw Miss Martian, I was like, oh, come on, with the ditzy, hello, Megan. The only female character you're showing me so far is this same stereotyped ditzy, girly girl character. I didn't like it. And I didn't know Miss Martian from the comics, so I hadn't read anything with her in it. Having said all of that, by season 2, Miss Martian's story arc, character arc, becomes probably my absolute favorite in the series. Her character in season 2 is freaking brilliant, and all because of all of the steps that she goes through in season 1. Amazing, amazing storytelling to take a character that I was not a big fan of and make her one of my favorites. And knowing that they did it on purpose, that they knew what they were doing from the beginning with that character and how she was going to grow. Unbelievable.
Yeah, absolutely, Rich. Miss Martian starts as this ditzy, goofy sidekick kind of person, and then she just transforms full 180.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. I did not hate her from the first episode, because I approach all things comic book with so much love and passion. I just can't, except for Gotham. But that's totally different.
That's a different podcast.
That's just me swearing for an hour on air.
I'm in. Let's do it.
But no, Miss Martian is introduced very briefly at the end of Fireworks. We have no idea who she is. But then so much happens about her and to her and with her. She becomes so important to the team and so important to how the story develops through these 2 seasons. She's not one of my favorites, but I don't dislike her. Like, everyone exists at least 5+ on my character scale here.
Absolutely.
So saying she's a 5, it just means she's at the bottom of the pack. It doesn't mean I dislike her. I just like other people more. But that's okay. And her story is absolutely brilliant and more well done than I realized the first time watching this through. I had to watch the show in its entirety several times to pick up on all the nuances of Miss Martian and who she is and what they do with her. All of that being said, though, we've pretty much blended a lot of our segments together here.
Oh, that's okay. I've got a lot more to talk about with the other segments, so I think we're good.
Well, hey, you know what? Let's call Mission Briefing to a close then, and let's touch on Feeling the Aster.
Yeah, let's do it.
So I think, listeners, you can tell that we both liked these episodes quite a bit. There's a lot of stuff we liked. Personally, some of my favorite highlights, I loved the Xenomorphs. Seeing all those guys down there is really cool. I loved little tiny elements about all the characters, specifically Robin. I loved when he would just laugh and ninja away.
Yeah, absolutely.
His hacking and his little face icons
his
giggling
icons
on
changing.
the screen.
Yeah,
yep.
Fantastic. Yeah.
I love that at the end of Fireworks, when they're in Mount Justice, he's still wearing sunglasses.
Yeah.
Because Batman has just beat into him, you protect your secret identity.
Yep, exactly. And Wally Kid Flash makes fun of him about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I love when the entire league shows up when they're outside of the destroyed Cadmus.
So good.
The fact that there's 2 Green Lanterns just made me giggle. I love that.
Yep. We could talk about that too.
I loved seeing that trinity of Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman right there.
Mm-hmm.
God, these episodes are just so fun. There's so many little things in the background. God, I am such a excited kid when it comes to comic books and cartoons. I can't help but just get all giggly and geeky and nerdy about it. So what about you, Rich? What are some of your high points here?
Well, I talked about a lot of high and low points, but some of the things that I did not mention were at the very beginning when the sidekicks are going up to the Hall of Justice with their mentors. There's a crowd there because, again, the Hall of Justice it's a PR location. It's a museum. It's other stuff for them to stay in contact with people on Earth. But they're walking up and you hear the crowd in the background and one of them says, "Oh, look, it's Flash Boy." And they're like, no, his name is Speedy. And then somebody else says, "No, Speedy's Green Arrow's sidekick." And somebody else is all, "Well, that doesn't make any sense." Right?
And they're totally right.
They're totally right. And this echoes back to a decades-long, super geeky conversation about that, just that existing. The fact that conversation happened in the first, I don't even know, 5 minutes of the show, again, told me that the people who write the show love the show. They've been a part of those conversations of why in the world is Speedy and Kid Flash. And it's a running joke at the beginning in the first episode that's pretty funny.
I also really liked how in that moment when Superboy realized he didn't have all of Superman's powers, that's kind of a throwback to how Superman was when he was first written. He couldn't fly. He just jumped really well. And so seeing that tiny little nod, obviously it has a much bigger factor in the story, which we will definitely see later on.
Yeah.
But to me, it kind of echoed who the character was to begin with. And it's super subtle. It doesn't matter. It's not like anything is hanging on this little nerdy plot hook nod, but it's cool. It's like, oh, these guys know comics. These guys know what we want.
I love that, and Kid Flash reacts by saying, well, you can still, it seems like you can still leap tall buildings in a single bound. That's
exactly.
pretty cool. Of course, the wordplay of Robin. So Robin, you'll find out through the series, as much as I adore Aqualad, he takes a very slight second place to the Dick Grayson Robin. The wordplay that they had, the whole whelmed conversation, the reason why the podcast, for those of you who don't know, who may not have watched the show already, is named Whelmed, is because at one point in the show, Mr. Freeze says
It's in the very beginning. It's the opening scene. When Robin shows up, I'm so underwhelmed.
Batman has sent you to take me in. I'm underwhelmed. And then it follows up with Kid Flash saying that he's overwhelmed at the Hall of Justice, and Robin saying, his now famous quote, Freeze was underwhelmed, you're overwhelmed, isn't anybody ever just whelmed? And that becomes a running joke through the entire show with whelmed, disaster. If dis means the opposite, then does that mean aster is the opposite of disaster? And so that's why, of course, feeling the aster. So I love that because it shows Robin's brain at work in a different way. It shows his brain working constantly. And that's the thing I love about Robin. And then the last thing I wanted to note was just the fight choreography. The thing that I love about the original Justice League animated series in particular, but that they echo here, is that everybody's fight choreography is so different, right? Kid Flash fights totally different than Robin fights, totally different than Aqualad fights, totally different than Superboy. And it's not just their powers, it's kind of who they are and their personalities and what they're doing and all of that combination. So you're watching, and again, knowing that these are choices being made by the writers and the animators to take the time to do a study of martial arts in general, but who knows, Aqualad can control water and charge his body with shocking amounts of, no pun intended, electricity. How do you incorporate that into a fight choreography when no one in the real world can do that? Controlling water and electricity is a brutal combination that is amazingly and smartly used in the show. So those are some of my highlights from the show.
Are there any lowlights? Do we have anything that we didn't feel the aster on here?
Well, the only thing that I would mention is that just Miss Martian, my original impression of Miss Martian, and my concern that the diversity in the show was going to be limited to the Garth Aqualad being replaced with Calder. That not only did that theory not hold water, it was completely blown up by this show. The diversity in this show, particularly into season 2, but even by the end of season 1, so many great, strong female characters, so many characters, particularly in season 2, from different racial backgrounds. It's just the way it should be. And they weren't like, oh, Batgirl's so good, I'm surprised she's a girl, kind of stupid comments that you hear in like a show like Supergirl that bugs me. She's just a superhero. She's just doing what she's doing, and the fact that she's a girl is irrelevant. The fact that Jaime, the Blue Beetle in the second season, is not a white guy, it just, nobody cares. He's just who he is, and it just is, and I love that. And that's it, I think. The first episodes really, really caught me. At first, I thought they were fun, and I was going to keep watching. We'll find out in the next episode of our own show that I didn't care for the next episode as much, and it also worried me. But then when I went to rewatch it and realized all the subtlety that was happening, that's when they blew me away.
See, we're very different. When I first stumbled across Young Justice Season 1 on Netflix years ago, I said, ooh, superhero cartoon. Ooh, I'm going to binge it in one day. And I did. And I loved it because I approach all things comic book and superheroes with the childlike glee of a 6-year-old.
Well, when I watched it when it was originally aired, and so I had to wait for the really bizarre release schedule. So for me, I had to work pretty hard to get it, and I had to want it. And that made my watching experience both better and worse.
Let's transition to our Canary debrief, where Rich gets on his soapbox to tell us about storytelling. We've been talking a lot about the skills that went into the story here in these first 2 episodes. So, Rich, take it away.
So one of the things that I look at when I'm looking at a show is, and something that just gets overlooked a lot, is what I call storytelling 101 stuff. In particular, what I call the Holy Trinity. Every scene should do at least 2 of the following 3 things. A scene should give information of some sort. It should develop the character. and it should move the plot forward. If you can get 2 out of those 3, then you're doing really good. If you can show me information about the world while you're developing the character, that's fine if you don't move the plot forward that much. That scene can just be what it is, right? The same way, you can move the plot forward and develop character and not give me a lot of information, just exactly what I need to know to move the plot. If you can nail all 3 things, then you're doing really, really well. Every single scene in this series does at least 2, if not all 3 of those things. They do it with multiple characters at the same time. That is brilliant storytelling. The other kind of subheading of what I call the Holy Trinity is show, don't tell. And if you're a writer or, a storyteller of any kind, you've heard this a million times. Don't tell me what the plan is and then show me exactly the plan you told me was going to happen. That's not helpful. So at the end of Fireworks, when Robin has made a plan, we don't hear what the plan is. We see him organizing the team in ways in the background while other team members are taking the action. And then we see the plan get implemented. We don't hear Superboy talk about, oh, but Superman, I'm so angst-ridden about the fact that you turned around and flew away. We don't need him to tell us that because you have taken the time to not tell us what we're supposed to be feeling. You let us feel it. And you take us on that emotional roller coaster instead of telling us how cool that emotional roller coaster is supposed to be, right? And you'll see this through the entirety of this series. There is a lot of showing instead of telling, and a lot which allows us to take that emotional roller coaster that they want us to take. I nodded to some of those things in our previous segments, so if you can go back and listen to that, I'm sure you'll hear that being reflected in my analyses, and it will be reflected in my analyses in the future as well. Every one of those introductory scenes of Robin and Kid Flash and Roy and Calder all have at least 2 of those 3 things that move things forward. It's kind of moving the plot forward a little bit, but they're mostly doing character development and giving information about the world. And they're doing it by showing us and not telling us. Go back and just watch those opening scenes again, and you'll be able to see what I'm telling you. And that's all I have to say right now. It's just setting the groundwork, I think, for the future, because I think we nodded to those things pretty well during the main body of the show.
Definitely, absolutely. And as we move forward, we're going to be talking a lot more about the cool storytelling elements, because the writers of this show are just top-notch. And there's so much more that they write than what is being said by the voice actors. And that speaks to the professionalism and skill of everyone involved. And that's one of those things you pick up on through multiple viewings. You're just impressed with the show when you first watch it. But then as you see it multiple times and you realize what the writers put into it and how they built this story, you're just blown away.
Absolutely.
This is definitely going to be a great segment as we go forward to analyze more about these cool elements.
Absolutely. Let's crash the mode.
Oh man, crashing the mode. So, spoiler warning. We will do our best to avoid spoilers in the other segments here, but guys, when it comes to crashing the mode, we're going to talk about some details. We're going to talk about some spoilers. If you didn't watch the episode, or if you're watching along with us, you might not want to listen to this segment. So that being said, here we go.
Yeah.
Let's crash the mode. Right off the bat, Speedy's line in about being born this way.
Right. So there's an opening scene where Green Arrow says to Speedy right before they go into the Hall of Justice. He says, "Are you ready for this?" And Speedy says, "Born that way." This is a foreshadowing in the first 5 minutes of the first episode that tells you what's happening in the season finale. It's unbelievable on the rewatching when I first caught that line, and it sent a chill down my spine that they spent all this time that there's no way you would have caught if you did not understand what was happening.
No, because we just see Roy being this hot-headed, brash, I need to get into the Justice League. You just said, when we were talking about storytelling, that first introduction paints him as such that brash, hot-headed character. We know right off the bat, he's just driven. He wants to be in the Justice League. He's passionate about it. But with that one line, it twists everything.
Everything. And we also talked about earlier about the fact that that Cadmus wanted to clone Robin, Kid Flash, and Aqualad, and they had the capability to be able to telepathically remove memories and implant them into the new clones and reprogram those clones. All of that comes into play because later on in this season, as you will probably know, hopefully if you've watched it before you've listened to this segment, they have been looking for a mole. They look for a mole through most of the seasons, and the person who is most adamant about finding that mole is Roy, and Roy turns out to be the mole. He turns out to have been the original Roy, had been kidnapped years before, that Roy had been cloned, and the memories have been put into him, and he had been a tool for the light the entire time. It is freaking phenomenal the way that they made that pull out at the end. Unbelievable.
That payoff is just jaw-dropping.
Right. And then in second season, we find out that like there's a nod to, at some point in time, Kid Flash or Guardian takes off his helmet. And Kid Flash says, "Hey, you look a lot like Roy." And he says, "Oh, I should. I'm his uncle." At the end of Fireworks, we hear Double X, who has the entire show been referring to Superboy as brother because he is another clone. Guardian is talking to Double X, saying this is going to be a kinder, gentler Cadmus, and we're not doing any more of these experiments, and we're going to free these genomes. And Double X says, "Then I am with you, brother." That is a first 2 episodes drop. That Guardian was one of the first clones of that original Roy Harper, force generated to become Guardian as a hero / security agent for Cadmus. It was shocking again to go back and watch episode 1 and hear Double X say that and grasp it after you'd seen everything that had happened through 20 plus episodes. Oh, so good.
And there's also another nod to that very subtly in the scene underneath Cadmus when the genomes all telepathically knocked out the heroes except for Superboy. There's a long pan shot of Double X and Superboy having this conversation about, do you want to be free? Do you want to make this choice? And Double X is saying how you need to be the hope for all genomes. And there's this huge pan shot across all the G-Trolls and different genomorphs, and there's a long pause on Guardian, who is standing there right as he's saying the hope for all genomorphs. It's so subtle.
Yep.
I didn't notice it until my 3rd or 4th time watching it.
Right.
So it's just amazing.
Also, we have to mention that the other subtle hint is that the voice actor for Speedy is the same voice actor for Guardian. And of course is the same voice actor for the original Speedy, who ends up coming back in the second season. The voice actor for Superboy is the same voice actor for Superman as well. It's the fact that they put these things in there that if you knew what you were looking for, you could pull out. But I never realized that at the beginning when I was watching the show. Crazy. So moving on to maybe some other things. The fact that Project KR is on level 52 makes a nod to the massive DC Comics reboot that was called The New 52 back in the day. You'll also see the number 52 pop up in their live action TV shows and things like that, apartment numbers, that kind of thing. That 52 references 52 different DC versions of Earth. In this particular case, the Young Justice TV show within the larger comics view takes place on Earth 16. So you're also going to see the number 16 pop up a bunch. In this particular episode, it comes up because Superboy is force grown in 16 weeks and is biologically 16 years old. Later on in the show, during the season, you'll see 16 pop up on timers in the background or comments that people make. It's pretty prevalent as you're looking through it. And then I have just one more thing, I think, which may be the same thing you have.
Bring it home for us, Rich.
Zeta beams, baby. Zeta beams. So when they first made a mention in the first episode that Speedy said that Hall of Justice is just a way station for Zeta beam to take Zeta beam teleporters up to the actual space station. They could have just said teleporters. And there's always been teleporters that they have utilized for the space station, for as long as I can remember anyway. But they didn't say just teleporters. They said zeta beams. Zeta beams are a very, very specific DC universe piece of technology that has to do with, once again, a super, I would even call C-string DC character named Adam Strange, who was just a normal guy. It's very John Carter of Mars. He was hit by a random zeta beam that teleported him to a place called Planet Rand. Ran. And he became this hero of their people, this alien hero of the people of Ran. When they mentioned zeta beams, I'm like, what are they doing? Like, is Adam Strange going to be in this? This is really weird. And then they get all the way to the end of the first season, and they just keep referring to zeta beam technology, and I kind of forgot about it. And then we get to the opening, second episode, and you find out Adam Strange is a technician on the space station that has been working on their zeta beam technology and was accidentally zapped to the planet Rand, which becomes a huge plot point for the second season. In the first episode of the first season, they're already planting stuff for the second season and third season. Unbelievable.
I'm going to call this mode completely crashed at this point.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Oh,
and
God.
I love it. I love Easter eggs. I love hidden little nods, but they're just so much better when it's not just a thing in the background. It actually comes full circle and becomes a huge plot point. Zeta beams are a huge plot point in season 2.
Absolutely gigantic, like cornerstone to it. And the fact that they thought that far ahead, this isn't something they've randomly come across. They clearly put that in there. Again, they could have even said teleporters in that first episode and introduced zeta beams as a zeta beam technology or zeta energy later in the season, and it wouldn't have mattered very much. But to know that they put them specifically named in that first season tells you that they knew what they were going to be doing with season 2.
Absolutely. So, again, kudos to the showrunners and writers and developers. They know what they're doing. Folks, if you have not watched all of Young Justice on Amazon or Netflix or whatever, you need to get into it because we're going to be talking a lot more about all these awesome plot points and spoilers. I don't want to ruin the show for you because those moments of realizing what has just happened is they're beautiful. I don't want to take those away from you.
All right, man. Let's get on to some fan service.
Absolutely. So with fan service here, we're going to be talking about cool things that fans of the show have done. One of the things we're going to be doing over on the show website, which is crashingthemode.com, we will be featuring artists who have done fan work about the show. If you swing over there now, you will see a very cool cast picture done by Litchi from Deviant Art. And you can follow the links there on crashingthemode.com over to Litchi's Deviant Art page. I love fan art. I think it's cool. I think it's going to be really fun to find different examples of what artists have done, what they're passionate about, what they're excited about, and being able to share them with all you guys. Please go check out the artists, give them some shout outs and love, and see what they have to do. What about you, Rich? What fan service do you want to share with us today?
Oh, man, I have watched this thing over and over and over again. I even downloaded the song onto my phone because of this. It's an AMV, an anime or animated music video. It is done by someone named G.T. Grandom. That's G.T.G.R.A.N.D.O.M. They took part of the song Shattered, which I had never heard before, and they folded in scenes from both seasons into this AMV in such a cool way. I could do an entire, and I may do an entire bonus episode breaking this video down beat by beat, how the lines tie into what scenes they chose. It's amazing. Go check that out. We'll have a link to it in the show notes. Again, GT Grandom, or you could just actually go to YouTube and search Young Justice Shattered. Also, I'll be posting, I have actually a Young Justice AMV playlist, and I'll be posting some links to that probably on the website somewhere as well. So you can see a bunch of these AMVs I'll be referring to in doing our fan service.
Absolutely. So in addition to the show notes for this podcast, of course, crashingthemode.com is our website. We will have essays, articles, responses, all kinds of resources wiki links, stuff about the comic books, stuff about the AMVs, things like that. If you want to get in touch with us to share some art, share one of your projects, talk about what we're talking about, of course, hit up the website, leave us a review on iTunes or whatever podcatcher you are using. You can talk to us directly on Twitter at the YJ Files, or via good old-fashioned email, whelmedpodcast@gmail.com. Or if you want to get in touch with us directly, Rich, how would they get a hold of you?
I am at Umbral Walker. That's UMBRALWALKER, Umbral Walker on Twitter. I'm also on Facebook, and that's it.
And of course, on Twitter, I am at the Caleb G. And feel free to get a hold of either of us all the time. And you know what? I think that pretty much wraps up episode 1, Rich. How do you feel?
Oh my God, I'm so excited. I'm so excited.
You know what? You said you were super nervous and excited at the start of the episode.
Yeah.
And then as we got into the thick of it, you just came at this with such power and devotion that I didn't think you were nervous for a second.
Fantastic, because, oh my God, I love this show.
Wonderful. Well, everyone, thank you very much for listening to episode 1 of Whelmed, and stay tuned for episode 2. We will see you next time. You've been listening to Whelmed, the Young Justice Files podcast. Our computer is voiced by Madison Ray. Our theme was composed by Emily Mio. Our logo was created by Kevin Bates. Whelmed is a fan-made podcast and is not officially affiliated with DC Comics, DC Entertainment, Warner Brothers Animation, and any other owners of Young Justice or its related source material. As such, these companies have sole ownership of all symbols, images, names, logos, and proprietary material related to Young Justice. Original content of this podcast is ours under Creative Commons. Thanks for listening, and stay whelmed.